Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of GCS Connect Leaders Series. We've got Thom Singer today, who's the CEO of the Austin Technology Council, which, having been to Austin, is a really big part of this really vibrant and fast-growing and one of the most dynamic technology, business cultures, that I've ever seen. So it's great to have someone of his stature on to tell us how this has been created and what their vision is for the future. So without further ado, here's Thom.
Hello, Thom. How are you?
I'm doing great, David. Thanks for having me.
It's been great to have you on board. We've been very excited about this one. We're obviously we've done a lot of podcasts ourselves, but I feel like I'm speaking to an even more experienced podcaster here, Thom. So it's great to have you here. And just to introduce you to our listeners, we have here the CEO of the Austin Technology Council, 12 years as a professional speaker. We're going to find out other more interesting details about his background, and obviously a representative of Austin, the community, and Austin, the city, in terms of technology and the industry that he's very well known for to the world and same to the States. So, GCS itself has been working in Austin for quite some time now, and we've had a good relationship with the ATC. But it's great to have someone with such a great knowledge and in-depth knowledge of the community on board. So, Thom, it's great to have you here. Welcome.
Great to be here.
Yeah, fantastic. So, I think for those that don't know, most people will know about Austin, Texas. Most people know it as one of the. I feel for us, kind of looking at it from kind of outside the States, as one of the first kind of areas that took up the mantle from what San Francisco was doing and created new tech hubs in different parts of the country, and is obviously kind of well known for huge businesses such as Indeed and Dell, but obviously many interesting kind of startup businesses as well. And I've been to Austin 3 or 4 times. In my happily one of my favorite places, and seen just how kind of important a part the ATC plays in that business community. So as I said, it's really great to have someone with your experience and also with your kind of knowledge of that. So just give us a bit of an understanding for those who don't know about Austin as a tech hub and about the Austin Tech Council and what it does to help promote and drive that tech hub.
Sure. Well, Austin, I moved here in 1991, so I've lived here 32 years, and Austin has gone through some of the most dynamic changes of any city in the world. We weren't always, every year for the last 3 years, number one in the fastest growing cities in America, but we were always on that top 10 list. And so when you add up 3 decades, when I moved here in 1991, the greater area had 700,000 people. We now have 2.4 million people, and we've built 1 road. Now, that's not fair. We've built lots of roads, but the growth...
Very wide road, though, Thom. It's a very wide road.
And we're about to widen some more. Some of our major highways are about to get bigger. But, it's really been an amazing story of Austin's growth. And most of that story has been around the technology industry. So if you go back to the 1960s and 1970s, we really weren't, as a globe, we really weren't this, technological business place in Austin or anywhere else. But we started to see trickles of it in the 1960s and 1970s. And then in the 80s and especially the 90s, Austin really started to explode as this tech hub. And in 1991, the Austin Technology Council was founded. It spun out of the Austin Technology Incubator, which is part of the University of Texas. It was spun out by several leaders, including George Kosmetsky, who was a real civic entrepreneur who really had a vision when he moved to Austin in the 1960s as a professor and dean at the business school at UT, that Austin could attract amazing companies to do things and was really instrumental in a lot of the chip industry that came here. So in 91, the Austin Technology Council was founded with a goal, actually 2 goals, and that was number 1, to put technology on the map as the economic driver of the future of Austin. And the second thing was to bring a fragmented ragtag tech community together. And essentially, you could say that, not that ATC did any of it alone, but we were part of that ecosystem. Those things that we were founded to do, big check mark in the checkbox. Austin is now one of the most dynamic cities in the entire world. When you think of a technology hub, you have to think of Austin. So it's been a wild ride. I only joined the Austin Technology Council 8 months ago, so I can't take any credit for anything that this organization has done over the 30 years that it's been here. It's gone through a lot of iterations, and we're ready to go through sort of a new iteration. That's what I was brought in to do, was to sort of find the new direction and reinvent the Austin Technology Council. So now is a real exciting time in the technology community in Austin, because 30 years ago, we had community leaders who had a vision for what Austin could be. And if you really look at Austin today, we're living that Austin tech miracle that those leaders set into action. So today, we're seeking those visionary leaders of today to be able to help look to where does Austin go in the next 30 years.
And I think, for me, it's just really exciting, because even from the few times I've been there, you see it changing kind of year on year, and there's a number of different contexts. But I'm just quite interested in there, therefore. So you've obviously seen those changes within Austin, and you've seen obviously the Austin Tech Council. I'm assuming you've worked with them over the years in your own private capacity. What do you think the key factors are that other than the vision itself, what do you think the key factors are that have really helped that and driven that growth? Because obviously, like you said, it's a great leadership story, right? 30 years ago, someone sets out a task to become one of the most dynamic tech hubs in the world, and then 30 years later you're like, all right, cool, tick in the box. So what do you think those key categories, those key factors are that have really driven it?
So there are a lot of them, and if you take out any one, it might not have been enough to stop the amazing growth. But when you stitch them all together, that laid the foundation for everything. So first of all, it was those community leaders. It was George Kosmetsky, Laura Kilcrease, Carol Thompson, Pike Powers. We probably could name 30 or 40 people who back in the 70s, 80s, and early 90s looked to where do we go next? How do we grow this community and be an attractive place for businesses to come? Second thing is Texas is a pro-business state, right? There's not a lot of taxation. There's not a lot of regulation. So that was an attractive draw. Then you have things like the companies that early came here, Texas Instruments, IBM. They brought people here and continued to start what was really this migration of the brain trust that came to Austin. And then in later years, you had Tivoli and Trilogy and Dell and others who, again, were hiring in people with business degrees and engineering degrees from some of the top colleges in America. If you meet someone who's lived here, 25 years, and they went to Carnegie Mellon or they went to Stanford or Berkeley, you can pretty much find out that 20 years ago, 30 years ago, they were recruited out of their MBA program or out of engineering school to come here and be part of some of these startups and larger companies that were looking to grow their workforce here. And then you have this entrepreneurial spirit. Austin has this drive inside of it to really be a place where you can be whoever you want. Austin's a very liberal, accepting town. And so we've always been accepting of everything, whether it was business, whether it was lifestyle. Austin has always been a place where people can come and be themselves and be accepted into the community. You also then have the University of Texas, which is an amazing one, top 25 university in the United States that was putting out top people through their business school, their engineering school, and all their other programs. And for years, for 100 years, people would graduate the University of Texas and wish they could stay in Austin because they had a love affair with the town. However, there wasn't a job base here back in the 60s and 70s and before. So come around
pretty much the university, because it's the state town, isn't it, of Texas, I think. Is that right in saying it's the kind of state capital?
So it is the capital of Texas. Yeah. And so if you go back and look at our history, we were a government town and we were a university town. Yeah. But now that has all been eclipsed by the business community. We are now a tech business town. And so again, I can keep rattling off pieces of this puzzle that were important. Our Chamber of Commerce back in the 90s really took an attitude that what can we learn from the rest of the country? And they would send delegations out to cities like San Diego that had experienced massive growth, cities like Denver that had experienced rebuilding their downtowns. And they would look at what did these cities do? And they'd take the best things. But while they were there, they would also meet with big companies and say, if you're looking to expand, Austin's a friendly place to come. So we have a recruiting effort that is continuing today through the Chamber and through Opportunity Austin and through groups like Capital Factory and other organizations, the Austin Technology Council, wave the flag that Austin is the place to be. So this wasn't one group, one thing, a little thing. There were 20 different pieces to this puzzle that all came together in a perfect storm and created what we are now living, in Austin, which is really an awesome, vibrant place to start a company, to move a headquarters. Look at companies like Oracle and Tesla. The list is very long that have moved their headquarters to Austin. It's a place where we want to be because the community is behind you and we support the growth of tech.
Yeah. And I guess part of the challenge of that is obviously the success of it means that people look at Austin and think, well, that's a good model to fulfill and follow, isn't it? So there's more Austins kind of popping up around the country. I know kind of lots of people mentioned Nashville and Charlotte and places like that in terms of cities, states, locations that are seeing that as a way to really promote and grow their communities as well. So do you see when you see those other places, you see that as a kind of a great community? We can look at these other places, or is there a competition there? Or?
I don't want to say there's a competition, but for 30 years, Austin was that alternative to the Silicon Valley or other big expensive cities, that if you wanted to go somewhere, Austin was that alternative. The cost of living in Austin 30 years ago was, a little more than half, but around half or 2/3 of the cost of living in the places, these big cities, Boston, New York, Silicon Valley, etc. Housing prices were less than half the cost of California. So there was a lot of things, no state income tax. There were a lot of things that were really attractive. So Austin was the alternative. Well, we're not the only alternative, and other cities are now positioning themselves as the alternative to Austin. And this is something that as a community, we need to be aware of. And it's not competition. It's not that these other cities that you mentioned, and there's more, are bad or they're trying to steal our stuff. It's that Austin has grown. We've matured. We now have issues around traffic. We have issues around the cost of living, the cost of housing. These things, we're becoming a big city, with 2.4 million people and expected to probably, double again in the next 20 years. We're a pretty big city. We're one of the top, I forget the number, but top 15, 20, cities, not necessarily the whole metropolitan area, but city itself. We're a big city if you look at the amount of people who live in the Austin city limits. So we have to realize that we're no longer the only alternative. There's a lot of places out there. However, what we do have is all of those little puzzle pieces, and Austinites have an unnatural love affair with Austin. So people who move here, who really embrace it, and not everybody does. I've met people who moved here who didn't like Austin, but they're a minority. Sometimes they're loud.
I don't know why they would do that. I love Austin. I think it's great. So.
Yeah, but it's Austinites have this unnatural love affair, so we're pulling for each other. When we've gone through recessions, Austinites are out there networking. They're helping their neighbors get jobs. They're helping their friends get jobs. If somebody's trying to found a company, people are making introductions to advisors and venture capitalists and investors. So Austin is a place that if you embrace the community is going to embrace you back. And that, because we have become so dominated by the tech industry, does make us unique.
And I think that's for myself, I work in a place called Reading, which is in Berkshire, which is the west of London, and it's got quite a vibrant tech community as well. We've got Microsoft, Oracle, etc., based here. So I always used to joke I started in recruitment in 1996, and it was quite a good time to start in IT recruitment because all these companies were moving here, so we could kind of hire and work with them. But and I also have done quite a lot of work with the Chamber of Commerce in Berkshire in the past, and seen the importance of it. But I think coming to a place like Austin, you can see the difference in different places when you go there. The importance of the Chamber of Commerce, the importance of kind of business community. And I always feel that, particularly for a kind of vibrant tech community, you need those vibrant, that vibrant platform to kind of grow from. And particularly within Austin, I think that's the thing I've seen the most in terms of, the power of it and the network that you kind of build within that. I mean, when you go to those events, people really care about it, don't you? Like you said, people are really rooting for the cause, aren't they?
Yeah. I actually think that, and these are my words that I've taken from the work I did before joining the council, that I've taken into the council, and that is that community, collaboration, and conversation can solve our problems. And I think that's one of the reasons that Austin was able to thrive so much over the last 30 years, is we had this vibrant sense of community. People wanted to collaborate. People, in some cities, larger cities, the Valley, maybe people were prejudging you based on where do you work, what's your job title, who do you know? You couldn't get through some barriers and some gatekeepers to get to see people. But Austin had this sense of community and collaboration where everybody would talk to everybody. We would have these high-tech happy hours back in the 90s, and you'd have venture funded founders with really successful companies. You'd have people who worked in engineering, people who worked in marketing all come together. Where do you ever see engineering and marketing at the same party? But in Austin, that was part of what you saw back in the 90s. The receptionist was talking to a CEO, and I had a friend who founded several companies, and he said, I love coming to these just really eclectic networking functions, because if I need a receptionist, if I ask my friend who's CEO of another company, he's never going to say, my receptionist is great, hire her, because he wants that person. He said, but if I meet him at a party and I find that they've got a great spark, then I can hire him to come join my company. So that was something that was very unique about Austin 20, 30 years ago, was this just melting pot of everybody, and nobody was really prejudging you based on your pedigree or your degree or whatever. Now, as we've grown as a city, you start to see silos. A lot of CEOs only want to go to dinners with CEOs. So their venture capitalists take out the portfolio, and their CEOs are like, I go to that every month or every other month. I don't need to go to anything else. And then you find verticals of fintech meetings and medtech meetings. And this is important. You should get together with the people in your vertical.
Your closed community everywhere.
Absolutely. But the thing that made Austin special, and that I'm working to try and keep alive, is we still need to have that thread that runs through everybody, where people are willing to show up, whether it's all tech CEOs or whether there's some service providers and salespeople there, whether it's the engineers or the marketing people. If we continue to come together and have conversations around that collaboration in that community, Austin will continue to thrive and dominate as we go into the next few decades.
Yeah, and that's the story, really, isn't it? So let's keep doing what was worked, because this is what's kind of driven us further than places. So what do you, when you put together these kind of meetings and the program, as it were, for the ATC, what are the things that you find are the things that bind people together the most, that people are the most interested in to kind of break down those barriers? Because, like you said, it is important to have a med tech meeting or a green tech meeting, because people have a very specific thing they want to talk about. So what do you try to foster in order to build a bigger group?
Well, the one thing I'm trying to do is take away any sense of competition between the Austin Technology Council and these other groups, right? The MedTech group or the FinTech groups. Instead of us trying to do, MedTech meetings also, I want to support their meetings, and then I want them to support ours. So we're trying to do some more general business type meetings, some high-level think tank conversations with CEOs and other leaders in the community about what does the future look like, and supporting these other groups. The first thing I did when I came in is we were doing a monthly Women in Technology breakfast, but it wasn't really well attended. I was looking at the numbers for the previous few months. It was a lot of work for a small meeting. And there's a group in town called Austin Women in Technology that's a thriving, strong organization. So I called their president and I said, look, I'm not going to do these anymore. I'm going to put yours in my calendar. I'm going to support the Women in Technology because I think it's important. I think groups like this are important. You should get together with people who are like you, whatever that means. And so instead of me putting on a women's meeting, which doesn't make any sense because I'm an old guy, is I can support a group that is already thriving, tell my members about it, and I'm not at all worried that someone's going to steal my member. If Austin Technology Council does what it's supposed to do, which is to bring the whole community together, then we serve a place, and so do these other groups that are more tightly niched to a certain topic or a certain demographic. So I want to be the place where we look to collaboration. I want to work with the chamber. When a tech company is looking to move here, we want to talk about, what the tech community is and does. So I want to create this thread that runs through tech that is not competing with anybody, but is lifting up and supporting everybody.
Yeah, and I guess that is the way that a real kind of community works, isn't it? You've got it works in a very collaborative way, and if you can get that sort of kind of collaboration between, and that's sometimes different within business, isn't it? You kind of find that sometimes that in business the battle lines are so drawn in terms of competition and who's making more sales and who's hiring the best people, etc., that I guess it must be quite challenging sometimes to kind of bring down those guards. I've been to many recruitment industry events where everyone's kind of hanging in their own group, not talking to each other. So recruitment's known for being very competitive. So I think in business now, and if you can kind of set the right tone, the people will talk and will share their war stories and problems and views, won't they?
Well, I believe there's a time and a place for competition, right? I mean, that's what makes, a capitalist society work is if you can, build a better mousetrap and you can get out there and create something and you can go and provide a better product or a better service, then you're going to beat the competition. And so that's part of what makes this all work. But there's also a time and a place for community collaboration and conversation. And that's where a nonprofit comes in. That's where a community organization comes in. And sometimes I meet these entrepreneurs, oftentimes younger, who they're like, I don't join things. That my grandfather joined things. So then you ask him questions about his grandfather. And his grandfather built an entire business by being very well networked in the community, chairing the Chamber of Commerce, hiring people. When people got laid off, they would, in other companies, they would find jobs for them and help. And it's like, your grandfather wasn't wrong. And while society has changed and we live in a digital world with likes, links, shares, and follows, spending time together and having real conversations face to face, there is still a place for that. And I often meet entrepreneurs who embrace it. And as you sit back over the years and you watch the people who embrace community, want to, are willing to talk to everybody within reason. Obviously, the more famous you get, the more often your phone's going to ring. You can't meet with everybody. But when you're starting out, to pretend you're busier than you are, that you can't have a coffee with somebody because you want to put out an air of, oh, look how great I am. Those people tend not to make it the long run, whereas the people who embrace community tend to.
Yeah, exactly. And there's so much collaboration available. Just while you were talking there, obviously talking about the younger generation, obviously we've seen building this community, which is GCS Connect, which is basically our online community of different leaders that we speak to. I mean, do you find therefore, obviously, your guy might say, I don't join anything. Then you might say, but you're on TikTok or you're on Instagram or you're on LinkedIn, so you are joining stuff. You're just not joining. Do you find that is that sort of community is something you have to embrace, but embrace in a different way, or would you prefer to say, let's meet face to face properly? Which is obviously something you can do in Austin because although it's a big place, it's a kind of smaller community. You can kind of bring people together easier.
So first of all, I wasn't picking on the younger generation. I just was thinking of somebody in particular who happened to be, he happened to be 30 who said that to me. However, I think that in society as a whole, and especially after the pandemic, we have gotten a little bit more disconnected. And I think these online tools, using a Zoom for a meeting, participating, following people on TikTok or Instagram, or being part of a Facebook community or a LinkedIn group, I think these things are awesome, right? I mean, these are tools that we can use to make, grow, and keep our business relationships. However, when I speak to groups about networking and growing community, I ask people in the audience if they went to college or high school, who are the people you keep in touch with today, 10 years, 20 years, in some cases 40 years later? Is it people who you happen to have been in the same club with but never talked to, or you were in a class with 400 people? Or the people you're still friends with today, is it the people you lived in the dorms with, who you partied with, who you went on spring break with, who you were in study groups with, who were in your fraternity and sorority or your sports club or whatever? Shared experiences is how human beings build relationships, and it's how we build trust. I can follow you on TikTok, but it doesn't mean I'm going to trust you if I'm in need. However, if you and I have been to lunch and dinner and we've hung out, I've been to your house, then I can trust you if I have a problem or a need. And so human beings, although these digital tools have come along, and they're fabulous. I love them and I use them all. They don't replace real human relationships. Someone I've never met who I'm connected to on LinkedIn, in the LinkedIn world, is equal to my best friend from college who is godfather to my oldest daughter. However, the relationship looks the same on LinkedIn, But a person I've never met who I accepted their connection 5 years ago never thinks about me, and I don't think about them. Whereas my best friend I talk to 3 days a week. He's in Vietnam with his older daughter right now, traveling, checking out different parts of the world. He's trying to do different trips with each of his kids who are now adults. And even while he's in Vietnam, we're corresponding about the greatest thing he saw on the trip. I know what he's doing today. I don't know what some random link on LinkedIn is doing today. We have to get back to remembering you can't have best friend relationships with everybody. You can only have a small inner circle. But if you cultivate that inner circle to where they know who you are, they can help you, they got your back, it'll change the trajectory of your life and your career.
Yeah, because if you look at something like Austin as a success story, that's been based, like you said, on 30, 40 leaders that probably met on a weekly basis, that shared ideas, that trusted each other and wanted to grow something kind of bigger. And I think, for me, I see social media as a great way to kind of bring people into the conversation, but it's not the conversation. We find that these types of conversations, right? This is a conversation that people are much more interested in than a status we post about, we're just about to open up our office in Austin or something. We're supposed to expand. These are the things that people buy into because they want to hear what people really think rather than, the status that someone puts up that probably isn't them, if you know what I mean. And I think it's really interesting because I guess, for me, like you talk about challenges, that's something that's changed quite a lot since the pandemic. And it's when we talked about putting this conversation together is obviously something for Austin. You talked about cost of living, you talked about, the traffic problems, that sort of thing. Then we get into something which I know you're quite kind of passionate about, which obviously is kind of, hybrid working, virtual working, that sort of thing, which can kind of, in some ways, I was up in London today, which is why I've got my suit on. So I've got my London suit on. I've decided when I go to London, I'm going to wear the suit because we go to the city and everyone's there. But it can really rip out the heart of an office community, can't it? If there's no one going in on a Monday or Friday and everyone's working from home, then that vibrant Austin that I know can be quite harmed, can't it? You haven't got those opportunities to meet.
So this whole concept of hybrid work, remote work, or in-person work, it depends who you talk to, and people are very passionate about whatever they believe is the right answer. What I have seen from talking to hundreds, that's probably true with everything in society, right? My belief is right, you're wrong. You certainly see it in politics. I'm right, you're wrong. But I've talked to, since I took this job, I probably talked to 150 leaders in the tech community here in Austin, and I've asked many of them about this. What are your thoughts? And the answers are on all three: hybrid, remote, and in person. And it depends who you talk to and how they're believing. So I think there's not a wrong answer. It's what works for your company. There's a lot of examples of companies that were founded 10 years ago, before the pandemic, who have been fully distributed teams, fully remote the whole time, and they work, and they're successful, and they're making money, and they have good culture. You have other examples of people who had face-to-face businesses, and their culture has been hurt because of remote work, and so they're trying to figure out how do we fix that. And then you have others who have done hybrid, and it's worked well, and then you can mix that up into any other way where things have worked or haven't worked. My belief is that people need to feel connectedness. They need to feel a belonging to their team. And so you can find ways to do that without having everybody come to the office every single day. But if you ignore it, then that's when you find people who leave, who quit, who don't feel it was a good fit. And that's why you have a lot of churn. So the answer is culture. I talked to one pretty popular, I won't say who, because I don't know if I have permission to share this story, but one successful entrepreneur in town who was, before the pandemic, all about everybody being in the office. He built several companies, and it was about that culture of everybody being in the office. During the pandemic, they started hiring people outside of Austin. Some of their people decided to relocate to less expensive places. And he said, so he's gone to a fully remote work staff. And he goes, all of his friends think he's saving all this money on office space. But he still needs office space because a lot of the people still live here and want to come in a few days a week. So he still needs office space, and he flies everyone in. And I think it's close to 400 employees now. And the ones who don't live here, he puts them up in a nice hotel every quarter because he needs the teams to get together face to face. He wants that culture. and he needs then to put on a party for everybody. And if you take 400 people out to the Salt Lick, for a party, that's not inexpensive. So he says to build culture in a remote and hybrid work world, it's not inexpensive because you have to bring everybody together. You have to do things. A Slack channel does not make up for going to lunch with a coworker a couple of times a year. So, I don't think there's a right answer. If your team is thriving fully remote, that's the right answer. If your team needs to come together to be able to collaborate and get work done, that's the right answer. And one story I tell is a young professional who I know is a big introvert. He's brilliant. He's one of the most brilliant, mathematician minds you'll ever meet in the world, and is known as such. And his company requires him to go to the office 4 days a week. And I said, boy, I bet you hate that, having to go in. And he said, I love it. And I'm like, why would you, the biggest introvert I know, why would you love going in? And he said, it's the collaboration. He said, when he's working on a problem, trying to dissect the data by himself, and he needs to talk to somebody, when they were remote because of the pandemic, he'd have to go on the Slack channel, find someone who's available, set up an appointment, get on Zoom, try to share the problem over Zoom, and it would take forever. He said, now in the office, he walks in someone's office, takes out a pen, goes to the whiteboard, writes out his problem of the data he's researching, and the person looks up on the board and goes, have you tried this? And they go up and together, they move X's and Y's around, and then they're laughing about it, and they've solved the problem in 15 minutes. So he said that as a data person and as a researcher, he's really a creative. And he goes, when you're a creative, oftentimes you need other people in the process. So he actually likes going in for that collaboration piece.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it goes back to what you were just saying there about the events and the meetups, isn't it? Yes, we can do stuff over social media, but we can do different types of things when we meet face to face. Yes, we can, resort in recruitment. You can sit and talk to candidates maybe more easily if you're sat in your office at home, but to do a sales day when you're reaching out to clients is much better to have the atmosphere around you of, tens of other people making the same call. So if you're getting like a bad call, you can turn around and they'll play you on the back and it's okay, guys, go again. You need that.
And one other thing I'd like to share on this topic is about a year ago, I got a call from a friend of mine who said, would you talk to my son? And his son, who was in his 30s, was passed over for a promotion. And he lived out in California. He worked for a tech company. And during the pandemic, they said, we're going 100% remote. So he moved his family to his cabin in Tahoe because he thought it would be a better place to raise the kids. And all of a sudden, a year and a half later, a promotion came up that had been sort of a wink, wink, nudge, nudge. You're going to get the promotion. And it went to somebody else. And he asked his boss, and he said, well, she's in the office. She's here every day. And he goes, you told me I wouldn't be penalized for moving to the mountains. And the boss said, you're not penalized, but you don't get the promotion. And so now he's moving his family back to the valley because he loves his company, he loves the job, but he realizes that for his career path that he wants, people need to know him.
Yeah, no, and I think
it's really up to the individual. It's up to the individual and the company, but we can't pretend that that it's not an advantage to being able to go to lunch with your boss every week than if you live on the other side of the country. The advantage goes to the person who they know, because the old cliche, people do business with people they know, like, and trust. It's still true. And that's true with internal politics at work, but it's also true with a community, right? People support the people they know, they like, and they trust. And that's why in a community like Austin, we need to keep that thread pulling everybody together so that people know who each other are, so that we can support each other in good times and in bad.
And when you're walking down the street, you're in a bar or something, you've met this person at an event, and you're like, oh, hi, how are you? And share a drink, share a kind of a bit of a gossip, that sort of thing. That's what you really want in that sort of community. And that's the sort of kind of, feeling that I've got when I've been there, is that they're kind of quite close, even though it's a very, very big place.
Shared experiences are how we build relationships, and meeting someone once, whether it's in person or online, meeting someone once doesn't make them part of your network. It makes them someone you have met once. And there is a big difference between someone you've met once and someone who you've cultivated a long-term and mutually beneficial relationship with. And so that's why community means interaction.
Yeah, for sure. And is these the sort of, like, when you're thinking about the program for the Austin Tech Council, do do you listen to feedback from the community on what the sort of events you should do, or do you put together a program of what you think, like the things we've just talked about? These are the sort of things that people want to talk about, that you put those forward. I mean, how are you driven with those sort of decisions?
So both. Like I said, I'm trying to have a lot of listening meetings where I bring different people in the community together and say, what should ATC be doing? Right? I've met with 150 leaders. I've done a couple of like roundtable think tanks, and I ask, and I listen for patterns so that we can create, some sort of a learning event around a topic that's drawing to people. The other thing is, because of my background as a professional speaker, I have a lot of friends who are big time speakers who get paid a lot of money to come into companies. Well, as a nonprofit, I don't have any money to pay them to come in, but a lot of them are my friends. And so I've been able to
business in the trust, mutual trust. There you go.
And then mutual trust and long-term relationship. And I've been able to get some speakers, both locally and nationally, who a nonprofit would never be able to afford. But they're going to be in Austin, and so I build an event because they're here, or I just ask for the favor. And so we've had some real amazing programming for people who you'd have to pay $10,000 to have them speak to your company, and we've had the opportunity to have them, come in and do a presentation. And I don't know that people really realize how fortunate we've been with some of the people who we've had speak. But using my network, I'm trying to get really good business conversations started.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that sets the next 20 years up. So you talked there about the vision that someone might have had in 1991, and then you talked about your new role coming in and maybe rebuilding that vision for Austin. So what are the main priorities for you, maybe over the next few years, as you see us kind of coming out of the pandemic and viewing like the kind of the economic situation? What do you really want to achieve from your role?
Well, I want the Austin Technology Council to go back to being a grassroots organization, because when it started, and I remember when it started, it was made up of a handful of really ambitious and community-oriented entrepreneurs and visionaries who were looking to the future. And, it wasn't about necessarily the events. It wasn't about the, how many members did you have, or who were the members, or who were the sponsors. It was really about the visionaries coming together and looking to the future. So I'm trying to bring it back to basics. I really want it to be a place where some of these visionaries say, we can come and talk about these ideas and then implement those ideas directly or indirectly through the tool of the Austin Technology Council. Because I won't be in this role forever. And, but the entrepreneurs who lead the community, if they're, young and up and coming and ambitious and aggressive, and they really care about the next 30 years of Austin, we have some board members who've been part of this organization for 20 years. That's what I want, is to find the people who want to be that foundation of Austin Tech and to share ideas for the next 20 years. So I don't know what that looks like. I'm not smart enough. I'm the first one to tell you that I'm not smart enough to come up with any of the answers. And so I need that grassroots support to be able to get the vision.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, that's the sort of thing that building that conversation, building that new vision is going to, like you said, like continue kind of Austin's success over the, maybe even get Austin to have two roads. How exciting would that be, Tom?
Well, what gets nonprofit organizations, community organizations, and companies into trouble is when the leader pretends they're more than they are, either as the leader themselves or the organization, the company, when they pretend they're more successful, or they pretend they have more influence, or they pretend they make more money, have more clients, or, they pretend they have more influence in the community from the standpoint of a thing. I don't want to say this is what we are. I want other people to say that is what you are. I want the community to determine who we are and where we go.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, we've talked to a lot of leaders, and I think that's one of the key things is sometimes that humility, isn't it? I'm here to drive the conversation. I'm here to put people's visions together, to make a vision, but not listen and not drive that vision. And I think, we always speak to excellent leaders, and I think that understanding of you're kind of almost a conduit for the vision, the communal vision is the right way to think about it.
Yes.
And it sounds like you've got that kind of that vision yourself, Tom. So you as you kind of think about like kind of Austin itself, my last question for you really is, what do you feel, when you're thinking about kind of the coming years are your kind of real worries? Like obviously there's a lot of talk at the moment about the economy and that sort of thing, and the problems with the tech community. Are you quite like positive, in the long run, if you know what I mean, about what's happening?
Yeah, I'm bullish on the future of Austin. I think that, there's going to be some bumps in the road. There have been over the last 30 years, 50 years, whatever. I think that, nobody knows what's going to happen with the economy, right? They've been predicting a major recession, like big time, for the last year and a half. And the can keeps getting kicked down the road. Is it going to happen? Is it not going to happen? I'm not an economist. I can't tell you. I do know that we need to be ready for, this. I mentor some younger people who are in their late 20s and early 30s. And I remind them that, they say, I got this great job. My company's going to go public. This one guy, he was like, oh, we have $100 million in venture funding. So we're totally going to go public. And I'm like, do you know how many companies that get venture funding actually go public? It's a small number. Yeah, and he's like, but I mean, even working in tech, he didn't realize that most tech companies don't ever have a giant exit. And so I encourage him as an individual to have an emergency fund. I go, look, you're doing great in sales, but the company could collapse tomorrow and no one's going to tell the sales guy. Company's going to collapse in a month. And I go, and you'll get blindsided. So you want to have some emergency money set aside for a plan B. I think that's true for a company, for a community, is we have to be ready for some hard times so that we can weave our way through them. But I believe that, like I said before, Austinites have this unnatural love affair with Austin. Austinites care about Austin. For the most part, we are still a very friendly, opening, welcoming town where we don't prejudge. People can come in and meet with just about anybody in town. It may be a little more complicated than it was 20 years ago, but you still can come in and you can move here without any ties into the community and have a leadership role. And have a leadership role in just a few years if you're willing to serve. So I think Austin's going to be fine. I think we're going to continue to be the city that everybody looks to as this miracle of what we created over 30 years. But it's not going to come easy. We need to get back to having this sense of community conversation and collaboration.
Brilliant. Fantastic. Well, Thom, that I think obviously it's great to find out more about Austin. It's great to find out more about the community, but I hope anyone listening today, and believe me, I've been to Austin itself, it's definitely there, but I think it's great for any community, any business leader, and any location to hear those great pieces of advice and try to implement them themselves. So
and check out our podcast. Our Austin Tech Connect podcast is I've interviewed now like 25 entrepreneurs and community leaders about their story, their journey, their success, but also their thoughts about the future of Austin. So if you want to learn more about what's in store, what is the vibe of the future of Austin, go listen to Austin Tech Connect.
Fantastic. And we'll put all the links up on the socials, as it were, so to kind of send you in the right direction. So thank you very much today, Thom. It's been great to speak to you. Have a wonderful day, and I'm sure it'll be a very successful period for Austin. Thank you very much.
Thank you.